I recently covered a Lincoln Project ad that was pretty effective, criticizing the Republican Party and calling Republican voters to action if they don't support the current MAGA movement, not to support the party just because. And I have another one for you. They go directly after Kari Lake, who has said before that we need to, quote unquote, fire the federal government. So she's trying to play up this idea that we should get the federal government out of Arizona completely. And it's incoherent and it's dumb. It just sounds nice, I guess, to people who hate the federal government. But we'll talk about this more in depth after we watch the ad. Overall, though, I think it really does make a good case for why that would be a really stupid idea.
That we're not going to take this anymore. We need to fire the federal government.
Interesting idea. Maybe it's a good idea. Of course, 42% of Arizona's budget comes from the federal government, so that would require a 72% increase in state taxes to fill the gap. You got that kind of money? No more Social Security checks. No more Medicare. Luke Air Force Base? Gone. In fact, say goodbye to most of the Air Force, Army, Marine bases all over the state. Arizona students would need to figure something else out because federal student aid would have to go. And sadly, all the national parks, including the Grand Canyon, well, they'd have to close. And we'd also lose all of our air traffic controllers, which sounds fun. But hey, drug traffickers would be happy. There wouldn't be a DEA in the state anymore.
We need to fire the federal government.
Right now, Kari Lake is just a kook with crazy ideas. But if Arizona elects her for governor, her crazy ideas could crush Arizona's economy, raise our taxes, make our communities less safe, and turn Arizona into a national joke. Does this still sound like a good idea?
So Kari Lake really is one of the most wild candidates right now running. And she's the one that I talked about a lot, who's following in Trump's footsteps with just claiming elections are stolen if they don't go your way. And even though she ended up winning, in the lead up to the election, she said, we're seeing some signs of fraud. So if I lose, it's because they stole it. And on election night, she said, they're trying to steal it. Of course, no evidence, just to prepare our audience in case she lost. Again, she did end up winning. And guess what? The other side doesn't claim it was stolen when she wins because they're not lunatics who don't like democracy. What's up?
Well, Luke, quick question on that front. Surely, being a reasonable and consistent woman, she also pressed her concerns about the outcome when the race was called for her, right? Like she still stood by
no,
her.
Well, what she did was, it's because we're so popular, they couldn't even steal it, but they tried.
Oh, okay. So there was, okay. So she didn't stand beside her claims of election fraud after they just vanished.
Oh, there was fraud. She just was so, got so many votes they couldn't, which makes sense. The way that they explain how elections are stolen makes it to where this idea that you could get too many votes to not let it be stolen makes no sense. If, the Dominion voting systems are flipping votes instantaneously with a computer software, even though the machines aren't connected to the internet, then why would 10,000 more votes make a difference? I don't know. So I guess she's going to do what Trump did, which was, I won, but not by as much as I probably would have. And Trump, of course, said that he won the popular vote. Whenever he was far off from that both times. But anyways, to the specifics of this, something Ruminate and I were talking about was one of the things that I don't think Republican voters think much about when they criticize the Republican Party generally is, and sorry, you cut out for a second, I just realized, and so in my earpiece, and that's why I think I talked over you just a second ago.
Can you hear me now?
I got you now.
Good.
One of the things I think Republican voters don't think about enough is the fact that it's primarily Republican states that get back more money from the federal government than they pay out in taxes. So the average taxpayer in Republican states and some blue states literally get more than they give out. They come out on top financially as a state. And so as they identified there, listen, if you want to quote unquote fire the federal government, all you're asking is to get rid of all of these programs that help your constituents, and to make it much harder for them to get by because they would have to pay much more in taxes to fund day-to-day operations of the state. So what is kind of your initial response to that ad?
Number one, it's interesting because I think this is not the first time that Kari Lake has said something to this effect. I want to say even within the last month, that she hinted at, if she wins the governorship, that there'd be secession. And, obviously that's a pipe dream. If there's anybody watching who thinks that the question about secession is not settled, it is, the federal government will not allow any state to just pack up and leave. But even if it's just a simple matter of, okay, we're going to stay part of the union, but we're just going to reject any sort of federal subsidies. Number one, you're still going to be taxed, right? The federal government's going to get its taxes. So if your state government wants to try to reject or pay back any federal subsidies, you'll be paying taxes and not benefiting anything from it. And there's that remark that every Republican accusation is a confession, and this is one of them. Republicans talk all the time, especially Republican leaders, about how lazy and entitled Democrat states are, how poorly run they are. But if you look, it's like 8 out of the 10 states that receive the most in federal subsidies are Republican states. They're red states. And the 7 of 10 that receive the least in federal subsidies are blue states, Democrat states. This is just another situation where Republican leaders, rather, are projecting their failures onto the opposition.
And to be clear, I am so pro those people getting all of the funds that they're getting. You know what I mean? I'm so for Republican voters getting more back from the government than they pay into it. Awesome. No problem with me. It's just wild when you hear them pretending that, like you said, it's those lazy liberals, those lazy baristas, as Ted Cruz said, who are really the problem in our country. And I'm saying none of the people getting money from the government are the problem, but they are.
No, I mean, to your point, that's also part of the broader problem with the modern day Republican Party, which is that Republican policies, the Republican Party's policies and proposals actually hurt their base, so like, Republican governance usually makes people poorer and makes the rich richer, and it is hippie, dyed in the wool, blue policies, progressive policies that want to provide welfare for the in terms of like the most financially insecure among us. So Republican voters, the rank and file voters, benefit most from Democratic policies. And if Republicans had it their way, the leaders, their voters, their base would suffer the most.
Absolutely. I mean, what was Donald Trump's really only large legislative win or legislative action? It was a tax cut bill that primarily sent benefits to the top. And I hear voters today still thinking that that was some massive positive change for the working class. Guys, they don't help you. Stop voting for them over wokeness. You know what I mean? That's what it's about. The Republican Party actually materially does not help, hurts their constituents. They just do a much better job than the Democratic Party at branding themselves. And they make it seem like the biggest threat to your life is trans bathrooms or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Republican Party is brilliant at playing politics for the most part. I mean, we're starting to see, again, hopefully a long-term shift in that now. But generally speaking, they are much better at image politics and branding. But I also think being a Republican in this political climate is like playing a video game on the easiest mode with the cheat codes enabled. So they have an easier job, period, because they don't have to offer substantive policies. But it is fascinating to me that they have been able to successfully indoctrinate a class of people, like a financial class of rural red voters, into essentially being their cannon fodder for terrible economic policies that will hurt them and make the rich in the back richer. I mean, it's just fascinating. I have family members, who are not very financially successful, but who are strident supporters of President Trump's 2017 tax cuts, even though they didn't really benefit from it at all.
Yep.